The emergency beacon pulsed weakly in the darkness of space. Inside the damaged escape pod, Zektal pressed his three-fingered hand against the cracked viewport, watching debris from his destroyer drift past like metallic snowflakes. His large black eyes reflected the distant stars, but all he could see were the memories of the last 72 hours. He had been a senior tactical officer aboard the Dominion warship Inevitable Victory. For 200 years, the Galactic Dominion had conquered system after system, bringing order to what they called the chaos of independent worlds. No species had ever mounted more than token resistance. The reptilian saurians had lasted 3 days. The crystalline Vorthak had managed a week. When they discovered Earth, a small blue planet with a single species barely 2 centuries into space travel, the conquest was scheduled to take 48 hours. Zektal's breathing apparatus wheezed as he remembered the briefing. Earth's military consisted of scattered fleets with primitive fusion drives. Their weapons were kinetic projectiles and nuclear warheads, technology the Dominion had abandoned centuries ago as crude and inefficient. The humans themselves were soft, water-based creatures with no natural armor, no redundant organs, and lifespans so short that most Dominion citizens owned furniture older than their entire civilization. The invasion fleet had emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. 300 ships arranged in the Dominion's traditional conquest pattern, a central spear of battleships surrounded by clouds of fighters and support vessels. Earth's defenders numbered fewer than 50 vessels, cobbled together from different nations and corporations. Zektal had actually felt sympathy for them as he watched their ragged formation through his tactical display. The first sign something was wrong came when the humans didn't retreat. Every other species had pulled back when faced with the Dominion's overwhelming numbers, trying to buy time for evacuation or negotiation. The humans accelerated forward. Primitive pride, the fleet commander had laughed. "Mark the time. I want to report exactly how long Earth's resistance lasted." The human ships weren't even proper warships. Zektal's scanners identified cargo haulers welded with armor plating, mining vessels with missile pods strapped to their hulls, and civilian transports bristling with point defense weapons. One ship appeared to be a recreational cruise liner converted into some kind of carrier. It was almost insulting. Then, the humans did something unprecedented. They scattered. Instead of maintaining formation like any sensible fleet, the human ships broke in every direction, engines burning so hot that Zektal's thermal sensors flickered with warnings. The Dominion's precise formation suddenly seemed cumbersome as human vessels darted between their larger ships like insects. "Fighter squadrons, intercept," the fleet commander ordered, still confident. The Dominion fighters were works of art, sleek, efficient, piloted by warriors trained from birth. Each one could destroy a dozen primitive human craft. Zektal watched them streak toward their targets, energy weapons charging. The first human fighter to engage wasn't a fighter at all. It was a mining shuttle, basically a cockpit welded to an engine with a mining laser attached. It shouldn't have stood a chance against a Dominion interceptor. The human pilot flew straight at the lead Dominion fighter. No evasive maneuvers, no attempt at tactical positioning. Just a direct line at full thrust. The Dominion pilot fired, landing clean hits that stripped away the shuttle's minimal shielding. The human kept coming. More hits tore through the hull, venting atmosphere in glittering streams. The human kept coming. At the last second, Zektal understood. But by then it was too late. The mining shuttle slammed into the Dominion fighter at a combined velocity that turned both ships into an expanding cloud of superheated gas. The explosion took out 2 more fighters that had been flying too close. "What are they doing?" someone gasped over the fleet communication channel. All across the tactical display, similar scenes played out. Human pilots and ships, held together by hope and determination, threw themselves at the Dominion fleet. A cargo hauler packed with nuclear mining charges plowed into a destroyer's shield array. A passenger transport dumped its entire cargo bay, filled with metallic asteroids, directly in the path of advancing fighters. A ship that looked like it had been a mobile hospital accelerated to ramming speed, broadcasting classical music as it aimed for a battleship's command section. "They're insane," Zektal whispered. But it was worse than insanity. It was calculated. Every suicide run targeted something critical: shield generators, weapon arrays, communication hubs. The humans weren't just throwing their lives away. They were trading them, piece by piece, for maximum damage. The fleet commander ordered the fleet to spread out, to use their superior range. But the human command ship, a battered thing that looked like 3 different vessels welded together, did something impossible. It broadcast on every frequency, in every language in the Dominion database, and in dozens more besides. The message was simple: for Earth. Then space itself seemed to explode. Zektal later learned the humans had spent weeks before the invasion mining their own system's asteroid belt, turning thousands of rocks into improvised missiles. They had calculated the Dominion's probable emergence point and seeded space with so much debris that it created a localized navigation hazard. Now, human ships weren't just ramming. They were herding the Dominion fleet into kill zones where mass driver platforms hidden among the asteroids could unleash devastating barges. But the worst part wasn't the tactics. It was the crews. Dominion warriors were professionals. They fought for glory, for advancement, for the expansion of civilization. When a battle turned against them, they retreated. When a ship was crippled, they surrendered. It was the rational response of rational beings. The humans didn't surrender. They didn't retreat. Zektal watched a human destroyer, its entire front section gone, engines failing, weapons depleted, accelerate toward his ship using emergency thrusters. The crew had to know they were dead. Their ship was venting atmosphere from a dozen breaches. Half their decks were on fire. They kept coming. The destroyer's captain appeared on an open channel. She was young by human standards, blood running down her face from head wound, the bridge burning behind her. She smiled. "From the stars we came," she said calmly, "and to the stars we return. But you're coming with us." The destroyer's reactor went critical 2 seconds after impact with Zektal's ship. In 3 hours, the Dominion lost more ships than in the previous 50 years combined. Not to superior technology or brilliant tactics, but to an enemy that simply refused to stop fighting even after they were dead. Escape pods were weaponized. Damaged fighters became guided missiles. A medical ship full of wounded soldiers vented its entire pharmacy into space, creating a cloud of chemicals that ate through fighter canopies. The humans called it the Darwin Defense, apparently named after some philosopher who said something about survival. Zektal didn't understand the reference until much later. It wasn't about the survival of individuals. It was about the survival of the species. Every human who died took as many enemies as possible with them, improving the odds for those who remained. When the Dominion fleet finally retreated, the first retreat in their empire's history, they had lost 60% of their ships. Earth had lost 90%. But Earth was still there. Zektal's escape pod drifted past the wreckage of the human command ship. Somehow, impossibly, its emergency lights were still blinking. The message they flashed in Morse code was simple: not 1 step back. He curled into his survival position, trying to conserve air. The pod's distress beacon would bring a rescue ship eventually. But Zektal knew that when it did, he would have to make a report. He would have to explain how the mighty Dominion fleet had been broken by a species that turned their own mortality into a weapon. The truth was terrifying in its simplicity. Humans didn't fight wars the way other species did. They didn't measure victory in ships destroyed or territories taken. They measured it in whether their children would see another sunrise. And for that, they would burn the very stars themselves. As unconsciousness finally took him, Zektal's last coherent thought was a prayer to deities he had never believed in before. Please, let there never be a reason for humanity to unite against a common enemy. Because if Earth's scattered nations ever stopped fighting each other and turned their collective insanity outward, the galaxy itself might not survive. The Dominion Council Chamber had never been so quiet. 500 of the galaxy's most powerful beings sat in absolute silence as Zektal stood before them. his body still bearing the marks of his ordeal. The medical staff had wanted to delay his testimony, but the council demanded answers immediately. How had the unstoppable Dominion fleet been turned back by a single primitive world? Zektal's translator Implant struggled with human concepts as he began his testimony. How could he explain beings who strapped engines to asteroids and rode them in a battle? How could he describe soldiers who continued fighting after suffering wounds that would kill any rational species? The council wanted tactics and numbers. Zektal could only give them nightmares. He started with the boarding actions. After the initial chaos of the battle, some Dominion ships had managed to disable human vessels without destroying them. Standard protocol was to board and capture, to take prisoners for intelligence and demonstrate Dominion superiority. The boarding teams were elite troops in powered armor, each warrior capable of subduing dozens of enemy combatants. The first boarding team to breach a human destroyer found the corridors filled with a thick white fog. Their armor sensors couldn't penetrate it. Some kind of chemical smoke screen made from the ship's fire suppression system mixed with cooking flour from the kitchens. The boarding team advanced carefully, weapons ready. The first sign of resistance was laughter. Human laughter, echoing through the fog from every direction. Then, music started playing through the ship's speakers, something the humans called heavy metal, all grinding noise and screaming vocals. The boarding team's commander ordered his troops to stay calm, to use thermal imaging. That's when they discovered the humans had vented coolant throughout the ship, dropping the temperature to near freezing. Their thermal imaging was useless. Motion sensors picked up movement everywhere. The humans had released hundreds of cleaning robots, all programmed to move randomly through the corridors. The first attack came from above. A human dropped from a ventilation shaft, wearing nothing but basic clothing and carrying what looked like a kitchen knife duct taped to a metal pole. A makeshift spear against powered armor. It should have been laughable. But the human didn't attack the armor. They targeted the joints, the sensor arrays, the breathing apparatus. They moved with a desperate fury that defied biological limits. Tendons snapping from the force of their strikes. Bones breaking against armor plating. And they kept attacking. More humans emerged from everywhere. Ventilation shafts, floor panels, behind hastily welded barriers. They had no proper weapons, just tools and improvised clubs and their own bodies. One threw herself at a warrior's legs, wrapping around them with all four limbs to slow him down, while others swarmed the immobilized trooper. Another used a fire extinguisher to blind sensors before attacking with what appeared to be a chair leg. The boarding team's superior weapons meant nothing in those narrow corridors. Energy beams designed for long-range combat couldn't track targets that literally threw themselves at the warriors. Strength enhancements meant nothing when 5 humans clung to each limb, their combined weight and desperation dragging the warriors down. But the worst part was that the humans weren't trying to survive. Each one fought knowing they would die. A young human male, barely adult by their standards, was cut nearly in half by an energy blade. He used his final moments to spray the warrior's visor with his own blood, blinding him long enough for others to find weak points in the armor. The boarding team leader called for emergency extraction after losing half his warriors. As they fought their way back to their breach point, a human female stood in their path. She was ancient by human standards, gray-haired and frail, wearing what looked like a maintenance uniform. In her hands was a simple projectile weapon, the kind humans had used for centuries before achieving spaceflight. The warriors almost laughed. Their armor could withstand direct hits from ship-mounted weapons. A chemical-propelled metal slug was nothing. The old woman smiled and shot the ceiling. The pressurized conduit she hit had been damaged in the earlier fighting, held together by emergency patches. Her shot destroyed those patches, releasing a stream of superheated coolant that filled the corridor. The warriors' armor protected them from the worst of it, but their sensors were overwhelmed. In the confusion, more humans attacked, and the old woman's sacrifice had given them the seconds they needed. Only 3 members of that boarding team made it back to their ship. They found similar stories from every boarding attempt. Humans had turned their ships into death traps. They collapsed sections of hull to crush invaders. They overloaded reactors and captured sections. One human crew had somehow rigged their artificial gravity to fluctuate wildly, causing borders to be crushed against ceilings one moment and thrown down corridors the next. But the boarding actions were just a prelude to the true horror. Zektal paused in his testimony, his throat dry. The council members leaned forward, some with skepticism, others with growing unease. He continued with the part that still gave him nightmares. After the initial battle, as both fleets regrouped, the humans did something unprecedented. They began broadcasting on all frequencies, not military communications or demands for surrender, but messages, personal messages, thousands upon thousands of them. Humans on the damaged ships were sending final words to their loved ones on Earth. The universal translators struggled with the emotional content, but the meaning was clear. Mothers telling children to be brave. Fathers saying goodbye to babies they'd never held. Partners exchanging words of love across the void. The Dominion fleet had seen many species face death. They had heard pleas for mercy, desperate negotiations, even angry defiance. They had never heard an entire fleet say goodbye with such calm determination. Then, the humans began to sing. Each ship's crew chose their own song. Some were martial anthems about glory and determination. Others were gentle melodies about home and family. A few were drinking songs, bawdy and defiant. But they all sang together, hundreds of voices per ship, thousands across the fleet. The harmony rose and fell like waves, transmitted across space in defiance of the silence that awaited them. The Dominion communications officers wanted to jam the signals, but the fleet commander refused. Let them sing, he said. Let them waste their final moments on sentiment. That was his mistake. While the humans sang, their engineers worked. Not on weapons or shields, but on their engines. Every functioning human ship was pushing their faster-than-light drives beyond all safety limits, turning them into potential bombs. But they weren't preparing to retreat. They were preparing to jump into the Dominion fleet. The first indication was a power spike detected by Zektal's sensors. A human frigate, barely holding together, suddenly lit up with the energy signature of an imminent FTL jump. Standard physics said you couldn't jump that close to other ships. The gravitational interference would tear you apart. The humans jumped anyway. The frigate materialized inside the Dominion formation, its FTL drive already critical. The explosion tore apart 3 Dominion vessels and damaged a dozen more. Before the fleet could react, more human ships began jumping. It was suicide on a scale beyond comprehension. Each jump had maybe a 30% chance of success. The other 70% would result in the ship destroying itself in transit. But 30% was enough. Human vessels appeared throughout the Dominion fleet like deadly flowers blooming in space. Some materialized inside larger ships, their death throes taking both vessels into oblivion. Others emerged in perfect positions to unleash point-blank bombardments before their overwhelmed reactors detonated. A human battleship, the largest vessel they had, jumped directly at the Dominion flagship. It emerged from FTL barely 50 meters from the command vessel, every weapon firing. The flagship's shields held, but the human ship kept coming, engines at full burn. The collision drove both ships into a death spiral toward Earth's moon. Through it all, the humans kept singing. Their voices never wavered, even as ships died around them. When one voice fell silent, others grew stronger to fill the gap. The songs became a countdown to annihilation, and the humans sang as if it were a celebration. The Dominion fleet broke. Not from defeat. They still outnumbered the humans 3-1. They broke from fear. Fear of an enemy that turned death into a weapon, that sang while they burned, that would destroy themselves 100 times over just to ensure their enemies died with them. As Zektal's escape pod had drifted away from the battle, he witnessed the final human gambit. The colony ship New Horizon, a generational vessel meant to carry families to distant stars, had been retrofitted with weapons for the battle. It was slow, ungainly, and carried 10,000 civilians who had refused evacuation. It also carried every nuclear weapon Earth could spare. The New Horizon broadcast a simple message: for our children's children. Then it jumped. The ship emerged in the center of the retreating Dominion fleet and detonated its payload. The explosion was visible from Earth's surface, a new star that burned for hours. 10,000 human civilians had chosen to die rather than risk the Dominion returning. Zechtal's testimony concluded with a warning that chilled every being in the council chambers. The humans hadn't won through superior technology or tactics. They had won because they understood something the Dominion didn't. Some things are worth dying for. And a species that truly believes that will throw themselves into the furnace of war with songs on their lips cannot be conquered. They can only be survived. The aftermath of Zechtal's testimony sent shockwaves through the galactic Dominion. For the first time in their history, member species began to question the wisdom of expansion. The humans had proven that conquest came with a price some civilizations were willing to pay in blood and fire. But the true horror was yet to come. 3 months after the failed invasion, a Dominion scout ship monitoring Earth's recovery detected something alarming. The humans weren't just rebuilding their fleet, they were building something else. Massive construction projects appeared at the edge of their system, hidden among the debris fields from the battle. When enhanced sensors finally got clear readings, the scout ship's captain immediately fled to report what he had seen. The humans were building colony ships. Not just a few, but hundreds. Each one was armed to the teeth, designed not for peaceful exploration, but for war. The message was clear. Earth was no longer content to simply defend. They were preparing to bring their particular brand of warfare to the stars. The Dominion Council convened an emergency session. Some members advocated for immediate peace negotiations. Others called for a second, larger invasion to crush humanity before they could spread. The debate raged for days until an unexpected visitor arrived at the council chambers. She was human, middle-aged by their standards, wearing a simple black uniform with no rank insignia. She walked through the massive doors as if she belonged there, despite being a fraction of the size of most council members. Behind her, a small honor guard of humans carried something covered in black cloth. "My name is Sarah Chun," she said, her voice carrying despite its softness. "I speak for United Earth. We have come to discuss terms." The council erupted in outrage. How dare a primitive species demand audience? How had they even found the council's location? Security forces moved to remove the humans, but Chun raised a hand. "Before you act," she said calmly, "you should know that we have 37 ships in orbit around this world. They are not military vessels. They are cargo haulers, mining ships, and one rather lovely cruise liner. Each one has a full crew of volunteers and enough nuclear material to crack a moon. I would prefer to talk." The chamber fell silent. Zechtal, observing from the witness gallery, felt his heart skip. The humans had brought their suicide tactics to the negotiating table. The council chairman, a being of pure energy contained in crystalline form, pulsed with barely controlled anger. "You dare threaten the Galactic Council?" "Threaten?" Chun tilted her head. "No, we're simply establishing the parameters of our discussion. You see, we've been studying your history since the invasion. 600 years of conquest. 43 species absorbed or destroyed. A trail of dead worlds in your wake." She gestured to her honor guard, who removed the black cloth. Beneath was a simple holographic projector. It activated, showing a blue-green world spinning in space. "This is Earth," Chun continued. 3 billion years of evolution. 7 million years of human development. 250,000 years of modern humanity. We have died for this world before you ever looked at the stars. We have killed for it. We have consumed ourselves in nuclear fire and risen from the ashes. This is not just our home. It is our soul made manifest." The hologram changed, showing images from the battle. Dying ships, exploding vessels, the faces of human crews in their final moments. "You came to take this from us," Chun said. "So we showed you what that would cost. Not in ships or resources, but in horror. We showed you that humans do not fight wars. We become them. We are the weapons, and our deaths are merely reloading. The council members shifted uneasily. Several who had initially favored a second invasion now seemed less certain. Chun continued, her voice never rising above conversational level. But here's what truly terrifies you. That was our divided response. Earth has 197 nations. Only 63 participated in the defense. The others were busy with their own conflicts. Imagine what happens if you give all of humanity a common enemy. The hologram shifted again, showing the construction projects at the edge of Earth's system. But now the resolution was clear enough to see details. The ships weren't just colony vessels or warships. There was something worse. These are what we call dead man switches, Chen explained. Automated vessels with no crew. Each one is programmed with the location of every Dominion world, every space station, every trade route. They are powered by drives that can only be activated once, because the activation process destroys the ship. But in that moment of destruction, they broadcast a signal. She paused, letting the words sink in. The signal contains everything. How to fight the Dominion. How to build weapons that work against your shields. How to turn civilian ships into bombs. How to make every death count for 10. But most importantly, it contains proof that you can be beaten. That signal will reach every oppressed world, every species living under your boot, every civilization that ever dreamed of freedom. The chairman's form flickered with agitation. You would sow chaos throughout the galaxy. We would give others the same choice you gave us, Chen replied. Submit or fight. But we would also give them the knowledge of how we fought. How a species with no natural weapons, no impressive technology, no great advantages, told the mighty Dominion no and made it stick. She stepped forward, and, despite her small stature, she seemed to fill the chamber. So here are our terms. The Dominion will formally recognize Earth's sovereignty and territorial claims. You will establish a neutral zone of 50 light years around our system. Any Dominion vessel entering this zone will be considered an act of war. In return, the dead man switches remain inactive. Earth continues its development in peace. And the galaxy doesn't learn that you can bleed. And if we refuse? The chairman's voice held centuries of authority. Chen smiled. It was the same smile Zektal had seen on the destroyer captain's face before she rammed his ship. Then we die. All of us. But we die loud. We die broadcasting. We die teaching. Every human ship will carry our final message to the stars. This is how you kill gods. The honor guard moved in practice synchronization, each pulling out a small device. Chen held hers up for the council to see. These are personal dead man switches. If our hearts stop, if our brain activity ceases, if we're harmed in any way, the signal goes out. The ships launch. The galaxy learns. You have superior technology, superior numbers, superior everything. But we have something you don't. And what is that? The chairman asked, though he already knew the answer. We have nothing to lose and everything to die for. Your empire is built on the assumption that life seeks to preserve itself. That survival is the highest goal. But humans, she laughed, and it was not a pleasant sound. We wrote poems about death before we invented writing. We tell stories of heroes who die for glory, for love, for principles that matter more than breathing. We are a species that looked at the void and said, bet you I can make it to the other side. The hologram changed one last time, showing children playing in a park on Earth. Their laughter filled the chamber, a sound so different from the war songs of the battle. Those children will grow up free, Chen said softly. They will look at the stars without fear. They will know that when the monsters came, their parents stood up and said no. And if you make us, we will burn this entire galaxy to ash to keep that promise. The debate that followed lasted 7 days. Some council members raged about being held hostage by primitives. Others, wiser perhaps, pointed out that the humans asked for nothing but to be left alone. They demanded no reparations, no technology, no tribute, just 50 light years of space and the right to exist. Zektal was called to testify again. He spoke of the human capacity for sacrifice, their willingness to weaponize death itself. He told them about the singing, about the old woman with the ancient gun, about children barely old enough to hold tools fighting in maintenance corridors. He painted a picture of a species that had evolved not despite their mortality, but because of it, turning their greatest weakness into the ultimate weapon. In the end, the vote was unanimous. The treaty was signed. As Chun prepared to leave, the chairman asked one final question. What would you have done if we had refused? She turned back, and for the first time, showed genuine emotion. Sadness. We would have died, she said simply. Every last one of us. But 50 years from now, when the rebellions had spread to every corner of your empire, when your fleets burned in the light of 1,000 liberated stars, when the last Dominion world fell to beings who learned courage from humanity's example, you would have remembered this moment, and you would have wished you'd taken the deal. The humans left as they had come, quietly and with dignity. Their ships departed Dominion space within the hour. The treaty has held for 20 years now, and in that time, humanity has spread to 14 systems within their zone. They trade with some species, ignore others, and maintain their military readiness with an almost religious devotion. But the most disturbing development came last year. A survey ship at the edge of human space detected massive energy signatures, the kind that only come from major industrial projects. Enhancements showed shipyards of unprecedented scale, producing vessels of unknown design. The humans were building something new. When asked through diplomatic channels, Earth's response was characteristically human. We're going exploring. The universe is vast, and we're curious. Don't worry. We'll knock before entering anyone's space. But if someone out there has a problem with humans existing, well, the message ended with an audio file. It was a recording from the battle, thousands of voices singing in harmony as ships burned around them. The message was clear. Humanity was done being afraid. They were taking their particular brand of insanity to the stars, armed with the knowledge that death was just another tool in their arsenal. And somewhere in the galaxy, there might be species that needed to learn what Earth had taught the Dominion. Some people don't break. They break you. Zectal retired shortly after the treaty signing, unable to continue military service. He now lives on a quiet agricultural world, far from the borders of human space. But sometimes, in his dreams, he still hears them singing. And in those dreams, the songs are getting closer.